I'd like to introduce my friend Evelyn Williams. Evelyn Williams is a very active person in our community, a former assembly person, a former president of the Newark Board of Education. So thank you.
Thank you. Good evening, all. But more importantly, I'm a native Newarker, 5 generations. I was involved in education. That was my fight. Not because they were my children, because they were our children. That's the way we look at it. They always wanted to know, how many children do you have in the school? All of them. And they're all still mine. And we had to fight. I come from a home where my father, also a union member, but my mother was on the PTA. Therefore, that's where I went. Joined the PTA and then the chapter 1, but to be involved in my child's education and the education of all children. And that was a fight. That's what happened. And that's what kept me encouraged, because parents came out. Some could not even read, but they knew they had to stand for their children. And if they weren't a mother or father, an adult stood for each child. That's all that's required. And guess what? We need more adults standing for our children today than we did yesterday. Because our children have just become a commodity. All is about the dollar. It's not love. Our teachers used to live on our block. They would call a parent. No longer. We don't recognize them. And all they want to do is put a price tag on our children. And let me tell you, we won't stand for it. Thank you.
Thank you. The first question that we're going to have, and everyone can actually answer this question: what key moments, incidents, and policies really changed the landscape during your era, for better or for worse? And we did, if we remember that we are focusing on the era from the 1970s, and then in the 80s during the era of an organization called People United for Better Schools. During that particular time, I'd like you to focus on what key moments, incidents, and policies really changed the landscape.
I think one of the most significant parts, when we talk about having a democracy, is the fact that we came up with an elected school board where all the people were involved in the process of bringing people together on a board to determine what should take place in education. Now, some of us may have disagreements with that particular process, but we also remember what happened with the fight at the board, the city of Newark, in selecting the Wilbur Parker debate, Callahan versus Parker, where someone who was on the city council or commissioner, whatever Callahan was, they had no education as it relates to being a CPA. Wilbur Parker, first black CPA, I think, in the state of New Jersey, for that particular position, and it was difficult getting Wilbur in there because the mayor at that particular time wanted to have Callahan. So it was a fight for having a democratic process in the city of Newark. So I thought it was very good when pubs and others came together. We got that achieved in the city of Newark. You would only have to look at what happened prior to that and what was going on in the city of Newark. So that was a very, as far as I'm concerned, as one who was born in the city, educated in the city, lived in the city, saying, hey, we got a chance to decide our future. We have to name ourselves and define ourselves.
I'm going to talk about the era of pubs as well. That's People United for Better Schools. And that was a good thing and a bad thing. It was a good thing because it pulled together people from the unions, the elected officials, and people who were what we call community people. That's parents and other folks who had been advocates for a long time for better education. And so we won an election. There are some details about that election. There was the candidates were Brown, Stecker, and Brown, and We had to go to court to make sure that 2 of them were seated. I was one of the lawyers involved in making that happen. So that was a very exciting time, a very heady moment, because we thought we had changed things. But as time went by, and I'm just going to refer to one situation right now that I thought was terrible, and I have it here in my book. I have a section in here called Winners and Losers, and one of the winners was Steve Adebato. In the haste to get rid of Columbus Sally, who was then the superintendent of schools, the pub's union and community leaders invited the Fox into the hen house. Steve Adebato had nothing to do with our election success and very little involvement in education issues before 1984. But pubs had only 4 board members and needed a 5th to get rid of Columbus Sally. And so they made a deal with Columbus Sally that if his person voted out Columbus Sally, we would vote for his person the following year. But Steve Adebato then became a member of pubs, and for all practical purposes. But he became bigger than pubs. He increased his influence by his ability to manage and win small elections with good turnouts from the North Ward. By keeping the elections small, usually with a 5 to 7% voter turnout, Adebato and initially Lou Turco, the East Ward councilman, determined who won the elections to the Board of Education and therefore had great influence over the affairs of the district. Through the years, the majority of the board elected has been black or brown, but the man who engineered the election of most of them is white. Was. Currently, his handpicked candidates constitute a majority of the board, and as I pen these words, there is a movement afoot to end his dynasty, but look how much damage has been done. That was a fact, is no longer a fact, but we need to learn from that whole situation.
You know, trying to encapsulate the whole era of pubs is very difficult. But I'd just like to talk about the relationship. Well, Gene Campbell and I went to college together, go to the same church, St. James AME, and have been friends over the years as superintendent. However, during the strikes, I mean, I thought I was fighting the whole world, but you know, after it was all over, we came together as a community. Elaine Brody, Dr. Elaine Brody from the Title I Parents, we sat down and in the tradition of black women, we broke bread together and said, she said, Carol, we're 2 powerful black women. Let's join together, and we did. And that enabled us to take care of a lot of business, which we will get to if the question is asked. Pubs, People United for Better Schools. Yes, it started out as a community effort. Reverend Oliver Brown, who was a classic in his own right as pastor of Roseville Presbyterian Church. Fred Stecker, who was just enjoying it. He was IBEW, and he just never thought he'd be an elected official, and was one of Tom Giblin's people. And Edgar Brown, who was a community activist in the West Ward. They came in wanting to do for the schools and for the children. And yes, as in all political movements, you have to watch the plants, because the professionals come in and then your guys and your movement is out. And you know, we're seeing a lot of that right now. It's brought us to this meeting. You know, we slept certain things, and now we're trying to get it together and to keep from fighting. But it can be done. Pubs did it, and it formed lasting friendships. And many of them are still in this room. Maybe not as old as some of us up here, but you came in on the tail end of, some of you are old as some of us up here. But you were part of the movement, and you're still part of the movement, and the beat goes on.